Trying to readjust back in the civilian world, I found it difficult.
Can't hold down a job, you're drinking too much, you're in agony, and you're wondering what the hell is wrong with me.
Depression and things, anxiety really set in.
If your soldier's showing these symptoms 6 to 12 weeks after combat, okay, that's a red flag.
It's a hard thing to go in there and ask for help initially.
Diagnosis of PTSD is not a death sentence. PTSD is a treatable condition that you and your family can work together to deal with.
Coming Home, Supporting Your Soldier is a co-production of NAMI Minnesota, the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Minnesota, and TPT's Minnesota channel. Additional funding has been provided by Optum Health Behavioral Solutions and Scott M. Craven.
I joined the military mainly because it was something that I've always wanted to do. In the back of my mind, I knew that I wanted to be a part of the armed services and eventually, if it came down to it, to go and fight for my country. I did my first deployment, which was a 9-month deployment over to the Arabian Gulf and surrounding areas, and returned for another 7-month tour into Iraq. Probably about 3 months after I had got home, and it really started to sink in that I was out of the military and that I had to get used to being back in the civilian world. I found simple things as far as like applying for a job or just day-to-day life, easy things that had become difficult for me.
Johnny was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and he was a Lance Corporal. He was very proud to be a Marine, and I took pride in him being a Marine. He had nightmares, though, every night. I mean, I would wake him up every night and like rub his back and be like, it's okay. And sometimes he would be talking in them, sometimes he wouldn't. But every night he would be tremoring at night and night sweats. Johnny was suffering from nightmares, anxiety, depression, and down the line, after he got out of the military, he was finally diagnosed with PTSD.
My name is Travis Schulze. I did 5 years in the Marine Corps, came out as a corporal. I did 1 deployment over to Afghanistan, and that was after 9/11. The discharge was really tough for me. And I assume it's tough for every Marine, especially, you know, combat vets. I got back from Afghanistan, and 2 months later, I'm Joe civilian, and I really couldn't hack. I was drinking a lot. You feel like you don't fit in. You're lacking that structure in your life. A lot of drinking to self-medicate, basically, which, you know, obviously isn't the answer, but you're trying to numb the pain, forget the memories, and it's really tough to go from, you know, carrying a fully automatic weapon to trying to walk down the street and just be normal again.
Combat stress and PTSD are actually two related but different things. Combat stress, the way that might look, would be usually someone having trouble sleeping, becoming more irritable, having a hard time concentrating or focusing, generally being really keyed up. They might find that their mind is wandering to things that have happened recently again and again.
So what we teach our families is if your soldier's showing these symptoms 6 to 12 weeks after combat, okay, that's a red flag. But in the first months home, it's not uncommon to have startled responses, nightmares, flashbacks, if you've been through some pretty harrowing stuff.
PTSD is similar to combat stress, only it's much more long-lasting.
PTSD can be defined as a disorder that has a number of categories to it. Number one, the individual has to be exposed to a traumatic event, a life-threatening event. Number two, they are bothered by groups of symptoms we call intrusion, that they encroach and crowd into their normal consciousness. Also a pattern of symptoms called avoidance, where they try desperately not to re-engage with things that remind them of the trauma. And finally, arousal, where they feel anxious and panic and difficulty sleeping.
Trying to readjust back in the civilian world, I found it difficult. So depression and things, anxiety really set in.
It was just a lot of drinking, a lot of fist fighting. I was looking for outlets, and you know, it was hard to hold on a job. I went through a couple different jobs, had a real hard time with school, ended up dropping out of school.
You can't go from living in a situation in which your life is in danger, in which you're living with the same people 24/7 for 2 years perhaps at a time, which every decision you make could be life or death. You can't go from that situation to a civilian situation without feeling some discomfort. You know, there's going to be some just reaction to that.
We just assume you can be gone 2 years and figure out how to put your marriage, your children's parenting, your education, your career back together again. It's a formidable challenge for anybody.
My friends and myself and people, we would all turn to either alcohol or just whatever else, just negative outlets for the majority of the time.
There is a particular pattern that emerges of somebody who has been exposed to combat deployment and then reintegrates back into the general world. It's characterized by a number of things. First of all, they don't see the world in the same way. You and I driving down the street may be much more aware of what the flow of traffic is and the street lights up ahead. These individuals, if they've been on convoy duty or encountered IEDs, are constantly scanning the environment. On one hand, logically they know they are back in the United States, but emotionally, they are still back in that threatening environment.
Stuff that used to bother you doesn't bother you. Stuff that didn't bother you before bothers you now. You have a hard time, like I have a real hard time when places where there's a lot of people make me really nervous.
You know, never expect somebody to come back from a 2-year deployment and just jump right back in and have everything just the same way it was before. That's just not possible. So you should expect that there's going to be some transition period. Again, if you have PTSD, the things you're going to see that are different are, instead of getting better, those things are going to get worse. So a person comes back, they're having a hard time fitting into their roles, but instead of gradually getting more and more into their work, more and more into their family situation, they're going the other way. They're getting more and more withdrawn. They're cutting themselves off more and more from activities.
Me and a lot of my friends just basically started drinking a lot, became real introverted, paranoid, just keep to yourself. You know, you can take the man out of the Marine Corps, but you can't take the Marine out of the man. And after you go through something like that, you just can't shut it off. The way I felt when I was really having a hard time, I felt like I was just decomposing inside, mentally and physically. Like I really had no purpose.
So really there's 3 main symptoms or types of symptoms that go into PTSD. First of all, a person has what's called re-experiencing, meaning that they're haunted by what happened to them. It comes back and bothers them again and again, either when they're sleeping or when they're awake, or just when they get around reminders of it. Secondly, they tend to avoid a lot of things. They avoid anything that reminds them of the trauma, but they also avoid just a lot of things in general. They avoid contact with other people, they withdraw from activities, from loved ones. And finally, they're very restless, very keyed up. They have a hard time sleeping, they find that it's much easier to get angry than usual, and they're very on guard.
But yeah, the problems are there right from the get-go. It's really hard keeping your temper in check. The aggression comes out in the wrong way.
Events that really stood out in my mind, that things were a little out of the ordinary and that it was just becoming too much, was I'd start to, you know, be a lot more nervous, and that the anxiety really set in on little things like driving down country roads, or stuff that reminded me of being over there. Really started getting to me, and it was making life for me very difficult, having problems sleeping. Just day-to-day functions started getting a little out of hand.
Depression is a big part of it. You know, I've gone through stages where I'll sleep 2-3 hours a night for a couple months, and then on the other hand, I'll sleep 14-18 hours a day because I just don't want to get out of bed.
Individuals with PTSD have a variety of symptoms, including lots of anxiety. It can include depression. It can include social alienation, nightmares, avoidance of crowds, all kinds of things.
The PTSD comes out in strange ways at strange times, and you know, it can make you really angry, it can make you really depressed, make you feel real hopeless.
Some individuals will not have any depressive signs. Some individuals will only have anxiety as the prominent feature. Some individuals have issues of impulsivity. Some individuals try to self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. So we don't really have a large-scale predominant pattern that everybody with PTSD is marked with the following 5 or the following 10 things.
John went into the infantry. He became a machine gunner. He was really good at what he did. On one of his deployments, he ended up going to Iraq.
Johnny was just an energetic person. When he walked into the room, everybody just turned around and smiled, because he lit the room up. He was one of those people that you wanted to be around, and you wanted him to go out with you because he just made your life that much better.
Things got real bad for John, I'd say about a year or two after he was out.
He just started like having nightmares and having, like, he thought there were Iraqis in the apartment and punching holes in walls.
He had bad memories, he had bad dreams, he had internal torment.
It started getting worse because he wasn't able to sleep at night, and so he would drink to go to sleep. I just thought he, had a severe drinking problem, but it wasn't that. He was drinking to make those terrible memories that he felt from the war go away, because he couldn't sleep at night, so he drank so he could sleep at night. He drank so he didn't have to remember all those people that maybe had died over there, his buddies, that he thought maybe he could save, but really he couldn't have. He felt guilty because he was alive. He would always say, and all my buddies are dead. That's why he drank. He drank to forget.
I don't know much about PTSD, or I didn't at least. I figured he was just going through rough stuff, due to what happened with him. And, everybody kind of deals with it in their own way, and I figured in time he would just get better.
He had been going to the VA since he got out of the military, and he had been seen by numerous doctors and been on numerous medications for sleeping medications, depression, things like that. But I noticed though he would try them, and he felt like they didn't work for him. They weren't helping him at all.
The aggression and the drinking just got worse and worse. And a lot of the stuff he was going through, I saw in myself, so I figured it was just what he was going through in returning to society. It
really got bad. At the end, I was pregnant at the time, and I had to actually, I had to leave because I said either you go get help or we can't be together anymore, because it was out of control.
You get lost in your own head dealing with your own demons. And I noticed these demons were really starting to tear him apart.
He went to go into an inpatient treatment for drinking and post-traumatic stress, and they said that they didn't have any beds. I think he just kind of felt like that was his last straw, and now what am I gonna do, And that was his last bit of hope, I think. And so a couple days after that, he committed suicide. January 16th, 2007.
Unfortunately, my brother was a delayed casualty of the Iraq War. He got 2 Purple Hearts in combat, but he ended up not making it later on.
If people see these signs, don't be afraid to go and talk to a counselor about it and get help. I know most military men don't want to get help because they see it as a sign of weakness. Well, look at what happened eventually, he couldn't handle it anymore.
It's still hard for me to comprehend that he's gone forever. I'm always going to remember my brother as a little brother. He was a hero to me.
He was very gentle and very loving, very warm, very thoughtful. He was a good man. He was the best.
We're coming back, we're trying to be, these war heroes, and yet we're messed up ourselves, and we realize that, and it's kind of hard because you want to stick your chest out and be proud, but you can't hold down a job, you're drinking too much, you're in agony, and you're wondering what the hell is wrong with me.
If you're coming home and you're having a few of the problems we're talking about, so you're not sleeping well, you're more irritable than you would like to be, it's hard to kind of relax, let down your guard, and people are noticing that. You have to think about, is this really getting in the way of things in my life? Is it causing a lot of problems? If it is, even if it's only been a month or two, it wouldn't hurt certainly to go in and talk to somebody and just kind of get a professional opinion about what's happening. That doesn't mean, again, doesn't mean you have PTSD or you don't. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to have a lot of treatment, but it never hurts to get that extra opinion from a professional.
It was a tough bullet to bite, and it's it's a hard thing to go in there and ask for help initially.
In the military, you're taught never show any weakness, never give up. Guys don't want to go and get help for the problems they're having because they feel that it's them showing weakness.
PTSD is something that people get. We don't know exactly why some people get it and others don't, but when you have it, there are certainly things you can do to deal with it, but it's not, I'm trying to say it's not the fault of the person who gets it. Doesn't mean they're not coping well. It doesn't mean they're thinking about it wrong. I've dealt with PTSD for a lot of years, and I have yet to see somebody who I thought, that person got PTSD because he was weak, or that person didn't because he was strong. It doesn't work that way. I
don't want to admit that there's anything wrong with me. I don't even want to receive help, except for the fact that I'm having a hard time holding down a job. I was drinking too much. I was sitting in the basement all the time by myself, not wanting to be around people, not wanting to talk to people, not wanting to go out in public.
When family members see things, that the individual is generally locked up in their own internal thoughts, not available for family interactions, avoiding the rest, drinking too much, or anger issues, that is a real significant issue. They ought to bring it to the attention of the veteran.
At first, I was basically poked and prodded by my family. They saw right away the changes that I had gone through after I returned home. And for a while, I just kind of blew it off. But after enough of difficulty with my transition, I took their advice and started going to counseling and seeing psychiatrists.
So if a soldier's having a problem, I'm not sleeping well, I'm hypervigilant, I'm abusing alcohol, I'm not comfortable in crowds, I have the startled response to loud noises, I'm home for 3 months and this isn't getting better, and it's hurting relationships, hurting your ability to work, then let's ask for help. So my rule of thumb, how does it affect your quality of life? Do you need alcohol in order to deal with this? Then it's affecting your quality of life.
It took me 5 years to get help. I probably still wouldn't have gotten help to this day, except for the fact that my brother committed suicide. And I'm willing to admit now that it's obviously a bigger problem than us military men want to acknowledge.
One form of treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder involves what's called exposure therapy. And exposure therapy means that a person is encouraged and helped to face the memories that are bothering them, and to face those memories kind of head on, so that in time the memories lose that power, they lose that fear that's associated with them, and they don't get in the way so much. And that's a common form of treatment for PTSD, and there is data that shows that that's effective, and that's certainly available. It is really important to know, though, that there are other forms of treatment for PTSD that don't require that a person face those memories head on. And so if someone doesn't want to get help because they don't want to have to look at those memories head on, that's not a reason to avoid going in and seeing somebody, because there are ways to treat PTSD without that.
One of the dirty secrets of trauma is that individuals come to believe that they were somehow unique. They were the only person who felt terror, that they were the only person who felt as though they didn't have the words to express what was going on. And so cut off and isolated, these individuals can become islands to themselves. It was the VA that really pioneered the aspect of group involvement, so we can begin unlocking some of the doors that contain the secrets, and these individuals then can begin making a continuity and bond with each other.
The VA has some national initiatives in place to provide treatment to family members and soldiers together, and the VA has been making strides in the last few years towards recognizing that PTSD doesn't just affect the soldier, it affects the entire family. And so if a soldier has PTSD, the VA will provide treatment for the soldier and the family. Quite often we'll see couples where when the soldier has PTSD and the family member also comes in together. And that's important for two things. First of all, sometimes you want to help out the relationship because PTSD is very damaging to the relationship. But also sometimes by helping the relationship, you can help the PTSD.
Seeking therapies really helped. Quitting drinking really helped. And that's probably been the hardest thing, because once again, I just want to self-medicate.
Now, one of the things that has been developed over the last, I'd say about 10 years, has been treatment programs that address both PTSD and alcohol or drug dependence at the same time. Because if a person is using alcohol as a way of coping with PTSD symptoms, and you're going to ask them not to use that anymore, you need to provide them with some other means of coping. And so we have treatment programs that deal with both of those head on, instead of having a person try to stop the drinking without treating the PTSD or vice versa.
It's a complement of working with the individual veteran, working in marital and family units, working in group, and adjunct medications to enable them to function at the very highest level that they possibly can.
Physical exercise is really important because it keeps you active. I hate to say it, but one of the best things to do is just be out with your friends and with other people and family, which is pretty much the hardest thing, especially for me to do. But the more you get out there and the more you're just being active, it kind of takes that stagnation away.
Spending time with family and friends can be a way of coping, and a very important way of coping. It's a difficult one for people when they're feeling cut off, when they're feeling really different. But one of the things we always encourage people to do when they have PTSD is to re-engage with their lives as much as they possibly can, because it's that re-engagement with your life that tends to lead to healing.
I manage my PTSD by continuing my therapy and checkups at the VA hospital. And then as long as I keep my outlets with friends and family and my positive influences, and then working and just doing day-to-day things, like working with the nonprofit organization I'm doing right now, and doing whatever, keeping myself busy. That's been the best therapy of all.
It's important to keep in mind that no matter how bad the PTSD is, there is help available, there are treatments that can work, and that there are a lot of different kinds of treatment. So if one treatment doesn't work, that doesn't mean you give up. There are a whole range of treatments that we'll always be willing to try.
My family's taking it really hard because they want to help, but they don't know what to do. I mean, my dad, obviously being a veteran, has helped me a lot because I can actually talk to him about this stuff. But, you know, my family, they say, what can we do to help? What can we do to help? And, you know, you tell them you don't know.
It's very important for your loved one to know that they can talk to you if they need to. It's very important that they know that they've got that available. On the other hand, your loved one may not want to talk about it. They might feel like this is something they need more time, they just don't want to go into it right now. And you need to be prepared to hear that. You need to be prepared to give them the space that they need.
At the time, that's basically who I kept close to, was my military friends, because I could relate to them the most. They were there, and they knew what I had experienced, and I knew what they had experienced. So we were able to at least talk about it and have some form of a outlet through the camaraderie and the friendships that we had.
First of all, families always want to be supportive. They always want to give people room, not push people, and that is very important. But the other thing that family members need to do is they also need to encourage the veteran to fulfill their responsibilities, to be a family member, not to let them withdraw so much. And so if you have a loved one who's come home and that loved one is becoming very withdrawn and it's difficult on you, it's okay. In fact, it's even important for you to tell them that, to say, this isn't working for me. What do we need to do here? Quite often, those conversations are more likely to get someone into treatment than a conversation when you just say, I'm worried about you, I think you're having a hard time, you should go in.
My friends and family have had a positive impact on my transition. They've been there to support me in every way possible. And mainly you just need someone there who lets you know that they're there for you and that they do care about you. So that was the biggest crutch for me.
The thing that's really helped me the most as far as dealing with my problems has been God, obviously first and foremost, but family is probably the second thing. You know, to have support from your peers and your family is just so important.
One of the things that might be really helpful for family members, if they have a loved one who's suffering from PTSD, is to get as much information as they can. And the more that you know about what's going on, the better able you will be to support your loved one, but also to take care of yourself. Another thing that might be very important is to find other family members who are dealing with similar issues so that you can support each other. As your spouse or your loved one is getting support, you getting support might be equally important. Diagnosis of PTSD is not a death sentence. It's not something that's set in stone and you can never get rid of. It's not something you can't do anything about. There's a lot that can be done about it on your own and with professional help. And it's very important to keep that in mind. Seeking help is just the first step, and then there's a whole range of possibilities after that.
Guys and girls out there coming back from combat just need to know there is stuff you can do out there. You don't need to go through this on your own. It's not just you. It is definitely not just you, because I felt like I was the only one having these problems. So did my brother. So did my buddies.
Don't stop until you get answers. Go to your county. They have a lot of different resources in the county. So, but I mean, and a lot of it you have to dig, and you have to actually do the work. They don't just offer you stuff. You actually have to like dig and ask for help.
If you don't want to get treatment through the VA because that goes on your federal record, then get treatment from the community. There are ways to get that treatment, and it doesn't show up on any kind of record that the military would have access to. If you're concerned about what your family might think, have your family come in with you and talk with the doctor the first time so the doctor can give them education as they're giving you education, so you're both on the same page. PTSD is not a sign of weakness, and it's also not a sign of being out of control or being a hopeless case. PTSD is a treatable condition that you and your family can work together to deal with.
There is hope only to the extent that individuals believe in hope. I've been practicing trauma-oriented therapy for years and years. I know personally that it exists, but you cannot drag someone screaming and kicking into mental health. The individual and the family needs to believe that the therapeutic tools that we have are a powerful agent to help reorient the person. Is there hope? Yes. The question is, will individuals avail themselves of that hope?
The most important thing is for that individual to actually admit that they got a problem and take that first step saying, okay, well, maybe I'll go talk to someone. That was the absolute hardest part for me.
I would definitely say keep on top of it, and only positive things can come if you go get help.
The way I feel today just changes from day to day. In a normal day, I can go through being completely depressed and angry and resentful and hating the world to being in a pretty good mood and feeling hopeful, like I can get back on my feet fully and re-assimilate into society.
Life is good. Life is a little slow, which is nice, but it's nice. It's calm, a little bit more peaceful. I'm not so much on edge, and I've been able to cope with that through my therapy and medication.
Coming Home, Supporting Your Soldier is a co-production of NAMI Minnesota, the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Minnesota, and TPT's Minnesota channel. Additional funding has been provided by Optum Health Behavioral Solutions and Scott M. Craven.